Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC EduSet live lecture. Dear friends, as you know that we are carrying a series on copyright and trademarks, and in our previous sessions we discussed about law relating to trademarks. We have completed with the introductory part on the laws relating to trademarks. Today we would be discussing on use of trademarks as well as grounds for refusal of trademark, and for this discussion we have once again with us within our studios Mr. Ashwani Sewal. Mr. Ashwani Sewal is Assistant Professor in IP and Data Security Laws, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. So dear friends, let's welcome Mr. Ashwani Sewal, who is all geared up once again to give you the resources, the content which would be beneficial for you to get in-depth knowledge on this very topic, on this very series. So without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest, Mr. Ashwani Sewal. Mr. Sewal, welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome viewers. After learning as to what is the meaning of the trademark and what functions does trademark serves, we have arrived at a juncture where we need to understand as to how a trademark is to be used with the goods or the services. And at this juncture we are supposed to learn the kind of the functions that the trademark serves at the very beginning, and after that how to fix the trademark on different goods and services. In the later part of the session today, in my discourse, I will be dealing with the refusal grounds or say prohibitions given under the legislature under the Trademarks Act 1999, which is an operative law relating to trademarks in India, and the section 9 and 11 prohibitions which categorically discusses and deals with some of the grounds for the refusal of the registration. I mean, on the basis of those grounds, a trademark can be refused by the registrar concerned, or the application for the trademark or the proposal for the trademark application, say the obtainment of the trademark registration, can be refused and denied. Before that friends, what constitutes use? It was dealt by me in my previous discourse as well as to what constitutes the use of a trademark. Well, the trademark is used in the course of a trade by the person concerned using the trademark. Well, as all of you have heard me saying in my previous discourse, that it is not necessary at all that the trademark must be already in use. Even a person can propose to use the trademark through his application. He can apply for the trademark registration by proposing the use of a trademark on the prospective goods or on respective or particular services or on particular goods or services. For that matter, he needs to specify in the application that he wants to obtain a trademark on this and that goods or on these and that services, and for that matter he has to specifically refer to the classes of different goods and services in the classifications given under the Trademark Rules 2003. Well friends, there are few questions which I will be categorically discussing and dealing with today in my discourse as to what constitutes use of a trademark. The very first question, and the ancillary question to this question of use of a trademark on the goods or on services encompasses another question: what are the unconventional manners of use? What are the new contemporary manners of use coming to fore, where a trademark is found to be used and can be called to be termed to be in use? And the second question that we are going to tackle and kind of an answer to the first question itself, the threadbare reading of section 22B and C and section 29(6) of the Trademarks Act, because the reading is necessary for the purpose of knowing what makes the use of a trademark a legitimate use as per the definition given under these sections, these provisions of the Trademarks Act. And there is one more section that I would like to point out here, that is section 101 of the Trademarks Act, which tells about the use of the trademark and which tells as to how a trademark is used on different goods or on different services. Use has to be made either by affixing the mark on goods or by using it in the statement with the services or making the statement for the availability of the services. In that statement, the trademark must be used by the person concerned who is either using the trademark or proposing to use the trademark with his goods or with his services. Well friends, one thing that comes to my mind and I would like to put across to my all viewers that use is necessary to be proved, but it is not an indispensable thing. Use has to be shown either in the future goods or say proposed goods or services by you, or maybe you are already using a trademark on certain goods or services prior to making an application. It depends entirely on the person applying for trademark registration. And what is the reason as to why this has been made flexible? The reason is quite simple, that the trademark registration is not mandatory. A person having no trademark registered can even continue with the use of a trademark with his goods or services. He can use that trademark without getting it registered. No formality is required to be done by him. He can just start using his venture, he can just start using his business or availability of service by any trademark, and no need or no requirement of obtaining the registration for the same, because the law relating to trademark registration does not make it mandatory. It says that it can be even an unregistered trademark. There are certain disadvantages of not getting the trademark registered, which are undoubtedly related or are associated with non-registration of a trademark, which I will discuss with you. I mean, some sort of impediments one may face in case he does not register his trademark. Some sort of obstructions he may face if he does not register the trademark. And unauthorized users may try to pass off, may try to infringe his unregistered trademark in the later course, and that will be little difficult for him to prove in the court that he is the prior user. For that he has to adduce several evidences, load many evidences to establish first of all that he is the prior user vis-a-vis to the later infringer or vis-a-vis to a person who has unauthorizedly appropriated his trademark. So that is why getting the trademark registration is kind of advisable and recommended by all the experts and by the councils of trademark or IP attorneys. So point is that it's not necessary to register it, it must be in use, and use can be a proposed use of a trademark to be made by the applicant, not necessarily to be presently in use. Well, how does a use be made, and what are the manners and different facets of the use? That is important for us. There are two things that are kind of apparent when it comes to using a trademark. One, by affixing the trademark on the goods. Another, you see, by making the services available with the statement of that trademark for those services, in the case of goods and services respectively. That is how a trademark can be used, either by affixing physically on the goods, or another conventional manner of using a trademark in case of services is to use the trademark by making the services available with a statement that it is in use. Well friends, there are coming some new manners of use of a trademark, which are unconventional manners. Use of a trademark through advertisement. It can be used through advertisement. I mean, the case is a peculiar case, or a situation is a peculiar situation where the trademark has not been as such fixed on the goods. No goods are available in the market with that trademark. No services are being made available with that trademark in the market. Still, by its use through advertisement, the trademark makes a market in the market. The trademark makes a mark in the market, and it becomes known and reputed over the period of time, over the course of time. This is what was established in one case law that I am going to take up today. First of all, by discussing the fact sheet and then coming to the ratio in that case law. Well, why this unconventional use is so important and has become so important for us and for my viewers? First of all, I would like to discuss on that. Well friends, in the globalized world, where the whole world is a global village, I mean where there are no boundaries, inter-states or say inter-countries, and the different countries are penetrating into the markets of other nations, other prospective markets, without any kind of a hitch and without any kind of a obstruction. In that case, sometimes it happens that they launch their products in the market, and sometimes they just penetrate through advertisement. They don't launch their products in the market at all. They don't make their goods available in the market at all, though the same goods are available with the same trademark in many other jurisdictions, in many other nations. In that situation, you see, the former situation is quite easy to handle when they makes the goods available or services available in the prospective nation or in the prospective market. But the later situation where they do not make their goods available in the market, they just advertise through advertisements or in the newspapers. In that situation, it becomes little tricky and complex to decide whether they have made a use of the trademark in India or not, whether they have, made a mark of that trademark in India or not. And why it is becoming so important, as I said, use as such is not necessary, but they have either to apply to the trademark board of the respective nation that they are proposing to use a trademark on this and that goods, I mean on goods A, B or C. That is how they have to clearly and categorically specify in their application. But if they have not made the registration application and their no application is sub judice or sub judice in the trademark registrar, before the trademark registrar, on the table of the trademark registrar, in that case they are just advertising their goods, as there is no requirement of getting the trademark registered. So as a you see, trader, they can do so, and it is allowed even by the trademark law that they can trade in the market without getting the trademark registered, because it is a no registration regime. But the point is, will they be able to ultimately make the mark in the market and devoid other users of the identical or similar trademark in the market? They can preclude them or not. It's a question which has to be answered at the end of the discussion, whether they are able to preclude and obstruct other prospective users of the similar or identical trademark in that respective nation where they have advertised their trademark. Well, this will get answered with the case study that I have to discuss with you. Before that, let us directly, before jumping to the end or the ratio of that case law, I would like to straight away tell you 3 provisions which will get invoked in this case law, or 2 provisions which will get invoked in this case law. The very first provision which defines as to when a registered mark can be called used on different goods or services. The very first situation when it will be called to be in use on a trademark is the situation when the person affixes it to the goods or on packaging thereof. The next situation where the person offers or exposes goods for sale, puts them on the market or stocks them for those purposes under the registered trademark. The third situation is when the person imports or exports goods under the mark. That is how a person uses a registered trademark. These are the 3 situations where a person using a trademark or proposing to use a trademark can be called in use of that trademark. First is when he affixes it to the goods or puts it on the packaging thereof. We usually, in the normal course of way or life, we see many packaging, and on those packaging, maybe a packaging of a biscuit or maybe a packaging of a soft drink, we find that a trademark is affixed or physically put upon those goods. Then sometimes we see people offering or exposing goods for sale with a trademark. They either put them on the market or stocks them for those purposes, for selling them or maybe for trading them with that trademark, or offers or supplies services under that registered trademark. That will be called a use of the trademark. And sometimes we find that a trademark can be used in the manner of exporting or importing goods under the mark. It can be sometimes used by importing or exporting goods under that mark. Suppose I am a licensee of some sort of goods, or say trademark goods, then in that case whatever I import to India, or sometimes if I export some goods on which I own a trademark, in that manner I am using a trademark for the export and import. That would tantamount to use of a trademark. Well friends, the next thing that comes, use of a trademark through business papers or in advertising. That is unconventional. This is a new thing. Even on business papers, if somebody is using a trademark, he or she has not affixed the trademark onto the goods. He or she has not, physically put upon the trademark onto the goods, or has not made any sort of services available with that trademark. Still, use of a trademark or a sheer use of that trademark in advertisement or on business papers amounts to trademark use as per this definition given under section 29. Though section 29 is a definition which talks about the situations or some acts it enumerates which would constitute infringement, which would tantamount to infringement. But we get an idea from section 29 as to what would amount to an infringement, or what kind of a wrong use of a trademark would amount to infringement. So these are the uses enumerated which are categorically saying that even on a business paper, if somebody is using without making those goods available in the market, without making those services available in the market, that mark or indication can be called in use on business papers. Well friends, for that I have a case law with me, that is N.R. Dongre versus Whirlpool Corporation. You can jot down the citation of this case law. Well friends, in this case law, a very interesting thing came for the consideration before the court, before the Supreme Court of India. And with this case law in the year 1996, the entire jurisprudence relating to use of a trademark got changed and overhauled. The facts of this case law are quite easy to comprehend and discern. The point is, and the facts are as follows: Whirlpool Corporation, known for making goods available or making goods in the market for sale and purchase, or for consumers to buy, especially the goods which are electronic appliances. Whirlpool Corporation makes certain electronic appliances, and their very famous product is Whirlpool washing machines, which is known almost in the entire world, and the Whirlpool name as such is kind of signifying to Whirlpool washing machines. People understand and know Whirlpool, recognize and identify Whirlpool trademark with washing machines across the globe. But it is easy to say this in year 2016, sitting here, that everyone knows Whirlpool, because in last 2 decades or so, we have seen a shift in advertising, we have seen globalization taking place, we have seen different methods and modes to be opted by companies and electronic manufacturers like Whirlpool to make a niche in the market through advertisement or through different social media or printing publications. And that is how their trademark in the year 2016 is known to electronic appliances, or applied to be on goods, especially in this case washing machines. But think about the year 1996, when this case law arose in the court of justice for the first time. At that point of a time, the knowledge relating to the Whirlpool as a trademark, moreover, the means of the communication or advertising of the Whirlpool as a trademark were very minimal, were very low in comparison with today's time, in comparison with the contemporary time, when everyone knows that Whirlpool is a washing machine, and Whirlpool is a manufacturer who manufactures some electronic appliances. At that point of a time in the year 1996, one Indian, the one present appellant in this case law, N.R. Dongre versus Whirlpool Corporation, N.R. Dongre, Mr. N.R. Dongre, started using the Whirlpool as a trademark on his goods, and the goods were similar. I mean, he started manufacturing washing machines in India, indigenously made washing machines by him under his manufacturing unit or in his manufacturing unit, and he physically affixed the Whirlpool trademark on the washing machines made by him in India. He started selling those washing machines with the name Whirlpool in India without taking any prior authorization from Whirlpool Corporation, who actually owns the trademark Whirlpool and has got registration on the word trademark Whirlpool in more than 100 countries or 100 jurisdictions with the goods which are washing machines in this case. Well, friends, having said that N.R. Dongre, an Indian appellant in this case, started using the Whirlpool trademark on his washing machines without prior permission from the Whirlpool Corporation, the actual user and actual proprietor of the trademark Whirlpool. The question arose whether N.R. Dongre, the present appellant, is allowed to use that trademark, where the fact of the matter is that the Whirlpool as a trademark is not registered in India. There was no registration obtained by Whirlpool Corporation in India on washing machines with the trademark Whirlpool. No application was made by them. Though they had registration of the word Whirlpool or trademark Whirlpool in many nations across the globe with the washing machines as goods, but in India they have never applied for the registration and they have never obtained the registration with the word Whirlpool on washing machines. So taking advantage of that situation, N.R. Dongre, the Indian appellant, started using the trademark Whirlpool on his washing machines. So the question gets narrowed now, will N.R. Dongre be allowed or not? Can he be made allowed or not? The court in this case was confronted with a very difficult question, was in a kind of conundrum to decide the case, because Whirlpool Corporation never used the trademark Whirlpool on electronic appliances, especially washing machines in India. No goods of Whirlpool Corporation, especially washing machines with the trademark Whirlpool, were available in India. Moreover, very handful of people were aware about this trademark Whirlpool at that point of a time in the year 1996. So the question is, in these so-called circumstances where the goods are actually not available, where the trademark Whirlpool has not been registered in India, no application has been made for the registration of the word Whirlpool on washing machine as goods by the Whirlpool Corporation in India. Can others appropriate it? Can others use it on the similar goods? Well, friends, the thing is that it is not registered in India. First of all, we have to see that this trademark Whirlpool is not registered. So, only action which is available for the Whirlpool Corporation in this case to invoke is the action of passing off against the N.R. Dongre. He cannot institute a suit of infringement, as the suit of infringement is a statutory remedy available under section 29 of the Trademarks Act 1999 at the disposal of only registered trademark proprietors, and the Whirlpool Corporation never got the trademark registered Whirlpool in India, so they don't have this statutory remedy available at their disposal. They can never invoke section 29 and institute an infringement action against the N.R. Dongre. So the only remedy available to them is the passing off action. So they instituted a passing off action that N.R. Dongre, without any kind of a permission and consent, has started using their trademark in India. The very first question, the very first thing that was decided by the court, that only passing off action is available. The next thing, that is the core issue and that is the moot issue in this case law, is the issue of whether Whirlpool Corporation, whose products are not available in the market, in Indian market, no such goods are available in the market, no buyers are there in the market. When the goods are not there, no buyers would be there. Are they using the trademark properly as per the law or not? That is the second question. So to tackle the second question and to answer the second question, the law, the court applied a very important rationale and a very important jurisprudence, wherein the court said that notwithstanding that Whirlpool Corporation does not have any actual market in India, notwithstanding that the Whirlpool Corporation has not got the trademark Whirlpool registered in India, notwithstanding that no buyers are available in India of their goods, notwithstanding all these things, the court came up saying that because Whirlpool Corporation has got the trademark registered with the trademark Whirlpool in several nations, in many jurisdictions of the world, with the same class of goods on electronic appliances, including washing machines. So because of this fact that they have reputation, they have goodwill, they are known in many jurisdictions of the world, there is a chance of spilling over of their reputation even to India. They have a chance of spilling over of their reputation into India. It means the court came to say, and court zeroed in to say that even through advertisement, and the fact is that the Whirlpool Corporation was advertising its goods in India through advertisement in very few journals, or through few journals or advertisements in newspapers, having a very less readership of those papers. I mean, not circulated into entire India, but still the court said that there lies a concept of spilling over of the reputation of a product in the globalized market, in the globalized economy, where Whirlpool seems to have a trans-border reputation across the globe. So what do we understand from this case law? That the Supreme Court of India made it convenient for a foreign investor sitting somewhere else in the world, having a trademark registered in different jurisdictions, not in India, to make a mark even into India without having a registration, or to have a trans-border reputation even in India without having a registration in India. And the implication and the impact of this judgment is sort of, is pro foreign investors and pro foreign trademark users, pro those people who don't have any kind of a trademark registered in India but have trademark registered outside India in different nations, different parts of the country. The point is that in that case law, Whirlpool Corporation and Anna Dongre, you see, the Supreme Court injuncted Anna Dongre, the local indigenous person, to stop using the word Whirlpool on his goods. But the important analogy, or say the important ratio that has far-reaching implications that came out of this case law, and which is a deliverable for my today's discussion, is the point of that there lies a concept of trans-border reputation and spilling over of the reputation, especially in those cases where the trademark is registered in many jurisdictions of the world, especially in those cases where it has just been advertised by a person. And advertisement, as I said earlier, as I spoke earlier, is a proper use of a trademark, no matter that the goods are not available in the respective nation or not, in the respective market or not. That is immaterial. That remains highly inconsequential. So what is not to be taken into consideration? That the goods are physically put or not. The only thing that is to be seen, that the goods are having a multinational reputation, are having a trans-border reputation, and it may penetrate, the reputation may penetrate by trans-border reputation and spilling over of the reputation even to those countries where it is just advertised, where it is not made available, where the goods are not made available. Well friends, with that note, I am finishing my first session. I will meet you in the next session. Thank you so very much. Welcome viewers. In this session, I am going to talk about some of the grounds for the refusal of registration. And why do we need to see the grounds for refusal of registration at this juncture is quite simple and plain. Well friends, it is necessary to understand and discern by all the prospective applicants as to how to make an application for trademark registration. And it is very important for them to understand that when one approaches the trademark board for obtaining the trademark registration, the trademark board and especially the trademark examiner, through the trademark examiner, the trademark board gets the trademark application evaluated and scrutinized. When the application is evaluated and scrutinized by the trademark examiner, friends, it is seen generally that he applies some grounds for refusal of registration, or he gauges the application, he assesses and scrutinizes the application meticulously on some of the grounds given under the Trademarks Act 1999. One more thing that must be told to all my viewers at this juncture by me is quite simple and plain, that the applicant who is thinking of applying for trademark registration should also keep those grounds for refusal of registration in his mind. Otherwise, his all efforts in making the application, in approaching the trademark board and waiting for a long time for the final disposal of the application will go in waste and will become redundant if he or she does not take care of those grounds for refusal of registration on his own. So one can say that these grounds for refusal of registrations are sort of some kind of prohibitions to be invoked by the trademark board in denying the applicant the registration for the trademark. Prohibitions to be invoked by the trademark registrar or trademark board in refusing the registration of the trademark. The scheme of the law is quite simple as far as grounds for registrations or prohibitions for registration of a trademark are concerned. Well friends, there are two stages or two components that are there as far as prohibitions for refusal of registration are concerned. The very first ground or component, the very first component of some grounds is the situation of a pre-grant registration situation, where the person applies to the trademark registrar and he is meted by the registrar by denying the trademark registration to him because his application gets negated on some of the prohibitions mentioned under section 9 and 11 of the Trademarks Act 1999. The another component which I will discuss later in my later discussions, where after getting the registration from the trademark board, the person using the trademark on his goods, with his goods or services, in that case sometimes his trademark validity gets challenged. So that part would be taken care of by me by purview of section 47, 57 and maybe section 30 we will invoke in that case. But as of now, as we are dealing with only the pre-grant stage, where the trademark has not been registered yet and the person has just applied the application for obtaining the trademark before the trademark board. So as far as trademark board is concerned, trademark board is an authority which grants the registration, friends. So don't get confused when I speak trademark board. For obtaining the registration, one needs to approach the trademark board. The trademark board is the authority where one applies for the registration and he or she gets the trademark registration done if his application is appropriately made, or sometimes it gets rejected, and the grounds for rejection and refusal are elaborated under section 9 and 11, friends. So first of all, I am going to straight away tackle section 9. The grounds given under section 9 are called absolute grounds for refusal of registration. and under section 11 some relative grounds for refusal of registration are given. Well friends, as far as section 9 is concerned, which talks about absolute grounds for refusal of registration, as the word absolute is used here under section 9, which makes it aptly clear that these are the grounds which can be invoked by the trademark board and absolute refusal can be done of the trademark application. It can be denied absolutely. I mean, if one of the grounds mentioned under section 9 gets invoked, if one ground seems applicable, rejecting or refusing the trademark registration, the trademark board can reject it on that particular absolute ground for refusal of registration. So it becomes highly incumbent for all my prospective viewers, all my listeners who are prospective trademark applicants or for my students, that section 9 is very beautifully articulated and very exhaustively enshrined. Section 9 in its sweep encompasses some grounds for refusal of registration which are absolute grounds for refusal of registration. The entire scheme of section 9 gives an idea that there are around 10 prohibitions covered or getting covered under section 9 clause 1 itself, and then in the later clauses, say subsection 2 and subsection 3, some more grounds for refusal will appear. So let us have a look at the language of section 9 friends. The language reads, in the marginal heading or marginal note, it is written that section 9 covers absolute grounds for refusal of registration. Coming to the main language of this section friends, it reads that the trademarks which are devoid of any distinctive character shall not be registered. Section 9 through subsection 1, section 9 through subsection 1 clause A reads that trademarks which are devoid of any distinctive character shall not be registered. This shall not be registered is written in the end of this particular section. I am coming straight away to the end of this section where it is written that the trademark which is devoid of distinctive character shall not be registered. Well friends, as I said that something which is devoid of distinctive character, what do we understand by devoid of distinctive character? What is distinctive character? Well, as far as distinctive character and its meaning goes, I believe that no further elaboration is required apart from reading the later language of section 9(1) clause A, which says that any trademark which is not capable of distinguishing the goods or services of one person from those of another person will be called a trademark devoid of distinctive character. I believe all my viewers have got the idea that distinctive character here refers to the capacity of the trademark to distinguish the goods of one person from the goods or services of another person. This capacity to be distinctive or this capacity to distinguish is called distinctive character of a trademark. That is called a distinctive character of a trademark. So if a trademark is found to be devoid of distinctive character, in that case that trademark shall not be registered as per the very first ground for refusal of registration covered appropriately under section 9(1)(a). Well friends, coming to the next part or next clause of section 9(1), we find that the trademark which consists exclusively of marks or indications which may serve in trade to designate the kind, quality, quantity, intended purpose, values, geographical origin or the time of production of the goods or rendering of the services or other characteristics of the goods or services shall not be registered. I am reading it again friends for your convenience. and the method of the reading of a provision is to start reading it from the very first clause, from the very first subsection. So subsection 1 of section 9 reads that the trademarks, and now coming to clause B, which consist exclusively. Well friends, I have highlighted the word which consists exclusively with one purpose. I'll discuss that later, but before that I would like to go to the further language of this part of the clause, which says a trademark which consists exclusively of marks or indications which may serve in trade to designate the kind, quality, quantity, intended purpose. I am stopping here to tell you that any trademark which consists exclusively a feature in a trademark which designates in the course of a trade the kind of products that it covers, the quality of product that it covers. If the trademark or any feature of the trademark consists exclusively something which designates quantity of those goods, something which designates intended purpose of those goods, something which designates geographical origin of those goods, something which designates the time of production of those goods, that kind of a trademark shall not be registered. Well, I am coming to explaining it. Well friends, what it really means to say is quite simple, and one can easily understand it through an example, or by making it narrow in terms of saying that section 9(1)(b) primarily covers laudatory marks, covers some such kind of marks which are explanatory to the goods, which are descriptive of the goods. You can use the word descriptive. So any mark or an indication shall not be registered if it exclusively describes the goods, if it describes or say loads the goods, uploads the goods. What does it mean? Suppose I want to use word best as a trademark. As per section 9(1)(b) prohibitions, I cannot use it exclusively on my goods, because by using the word best, what I am doing, I am boasting about the quality of my goods, talking about the superiority of my goods, and that is not allowed as per section 9(1)(b) prohibitions, and these are absolute grounds for the refusal of registration. No one can own the word best, or say for example, suppose I use word, you see, which describes those goods. I use word apple for fruits, for apple fruits, or my business of selling apple as fruits. I will never be able to own trademark apple, own my goods which are apple in question, because it is becoming descriptive. And the thing that has to be understood by all my viewers here is that section 9(1)(b) by its sweep and purview restricts exclusive use of these laudatory and descriptive words. It does not restrict use of these words, but it restricts exclusive use of these words. So what does it mean indirectly? That if one wants to use these laudatory and descriptive words not exclusively as a trademark, rather as one of the feature in the trademark in the composite mark. Well friends, it becomes very incumbent for me to make you understand what is the meaning of the composite mark. Composite mark means a mark which comprises many indications in it, may encompass many marks in it, or say many things in it. For example, a mark which includes a getup, overall getup, the packaging itself, then the color combination on the getup, then the words written on the getup, some letters written on the getup, a device or a logo is affixed on the getup or on the packaging. So that composite, that is called a composite mark. I mean, there are several things as a mark or an indication sorry, used in the trademark here. So see what section 9 by purview of 9(1)(b) prohibits. It prohibits the use of a laudatory and descriptive word exclusively. So if one wants to use laudatory or descriptive word in a composite mark, one is allowed to do so. He can coin a word having a laudatory word in it. He can coin a word having a descriptive word used in it. He can coin a composite mark having one of the prohibited mark used in it. Any mark which designates the kind, quality, intended purpose, geographical origin in time of the production of those goods, that would be fine. I mean, the law cannot restrict that kind of a composite mark having one of the mark in it which is laudatory or which may be descriptive. But if one tries to exclusively use a trademark which is in nutshell descriptive, which is in nutshell laudatory of the goods or of the services, that is not allowed, that cannot be done. And for that matter, the trademark registrar shall not register that kind of a trademark in the trademark register maintained by him. No trademark registration would be thrown to the person seeking that kind of a trademark registration. Well friends, coming to the next prohibition of section 9, it reads that the trademark which consists exclusively of marks or indications which have become customary in the current language or in the bona fide and established practices of the trade shall not be registered. Well friends, this is very important to understand that there are two things that is getting covered under 9(1)(c). As highlighted by me in the main language, something which consists exclusively, some mark which is exclusively a mark which has become customary in the current language, some mark which has become bona fide and established practice of a trade. Well friends, for that I can give you certain examples. As far as the word customary in the current language is concerned, the prohibition is to what? The prohibition is relating to or is referring to a customary word, some indication, some mark which has become customary in the current language that cannot be given a trademark registration as per 9(1)(c). What becomes customary in the current language? Say for example, the word rasoi has become customary in the current language. The word rasoi cannot be registered. I mean, one person, one individual cannot use the word rasoi exclusively as a trademark on his goods. We can take an example. Suppose I want to start a business of kitchen utensils, of manufacturing kitchen utensils, and I want to name my business as rasoi. I mean, I want to start a venture of manufacturing kitchen utensils with the trademark rasoi. As per section 9(1)(c), which reads categorically that the trademark which consists exclusively any word or indication which have become customary in the current language, it shall not be registered. So in this example, in the instant example given by me, wherein I am trying to use a word rasoi on my kitchen utensils, I won't be allowed, because the prohibition of customary language will accrue, will invoke, and I shall be refused the registration by the registrar, by the trademark board. No registration for the word rasoi should be given to me. The next thing that comes in the same clause, the next prohibition, there are two prohibitions that are coming under section 9(c), and there came 8 prohibitions under section 9(1)(b), which I have covered already. The second prohibition that is coming under section 9(1)(c) is something which has become bona fide and something which is an established practice of a trade. Well, it depends on the trade and the facts adduced by the parties, or say by facts gathered by the trademark board in denying the trademark registration. There are certain examples which I can pick, I mean common examples from the normal walk of life. Well friends, in the case of marbles, you see, in the case of marbles, use of word Makadana marble has become established practice of a trade. Use of a word Makadana marble has become an established practice of a trade. That kind of a marble, which is a peculiar marble, comes from the state of Rajasthan, is being sold across the country and even goes outside the country because of its shine, because of its glow, because of its prominent features. The point that I want to convey and make you understand, that if one wants to own Makadana as a trademark with his goods, he won't be allowed, because use of that particular trademark Makadana has become established practice of a trade in the case of marbles. So he shall not be given a trademark registration, he shall be refused the registration of the trademark. Well friends, summarizing what I have said in 5 minutes time, as far as section 9 is concerned and the prohibitions covered under section 9 are concerned, I would like to tell you that there are coming 10 basic prohibitions, 10 grounds for refusal of registration under section 9(1) B and C, and in the very beginning under section 9(1) A there comes one more prohibition which says, if any trademark, if it is devoid of any distinctive character, its capability to distinguish the goods or services from one person to another person, it shall not be registered. Then under 9(1) B, descriptive marks are refused to be registered. Well, I will bring many examples to explain what would be called a descriptive mark, but a very short example to be given at this juncture is the example of any geographical name. Word Shimla, I mean the word Shimla here, cannot be used as a trademark on the goods, because Shimla is descriptive of a geographical place. It is a geographical place in India. So Shimla word as such cannot be used because it describes a geographical place, it is descriptive. Similarly, the word best cannot be used because it tells about the quality of the goods. Similarly, word apple for apple cannot be used for apple business because it tells the kind of the goods. Word milk cannot be used for milk. The point is, and it must be coming to your mind also, then why you see word dairy is used in the case of mother dairy as a trademark. Point is, friends, that the word dairy is not used exclusively. What section 9(1) B prohibits? Exclusive use of laudatory and descriptive marks. It does not prohibit use of laudatory and descriptive marks if they are used in a composite sense as a composite trademark. Their exclusive use is prohibited, and if they are used with the other kind of marks, then it is allowed. Say for example, in the case of mother dairy, the word mother is used with the dairy products. We know that mother dairy is a trademark for dairy products, milk, curd, cheese, butter, and so on and so forth. The point to be understood is that the word mother is used. So mother dairy is becoming a composite mark. Had they using the word dairy only, the situation would have been different. They would not have been able to use the word dairy on dairy goods. But as it is a case where they are using a composite mark, mother dairy, along with the word mother, it has become a composite mark. It is allowed, it can be used. Nobody can restrict, and no prohibition of section 9(1) B can be ever invoked. Similarly, in the case of 9(1) C, friends, it says that if anyone uses a mark or an indication which consists exclusively something which have become customary in the current language, or something which is bona fide and established practice of a trade, that shall not be registered. This is what it says. Well friends, after that there comes under section 9 a very important aspect which I believe is necessary to be told to my friend, to my viewers at this juncture. There comes a proviso, which is an exception to what section 9 covers in its sweep. I mean something which does not prohibit the registration of marks, rather which increases and enables the prohibition of the, which increases and enables the registration of the marks. There is a proviso in the end of section 9(1), and the proviso reads, provided that a trademark shall not be refused registration if before the date of application for registration it has acquired a distinctive character as a result of use made of it or is a well-known trademark. Well friends, as I told that section 9 in its entire composition speaks about some grounds for the refusal of registration in totality. I mean around 10 grounds are given under 9(1), then under 9(2) there are some more grounds, then under 9(3) there are some other grounds available for refusing the registration of the trademark. But only on 2 occasions section 9 appears to be enabling the trademark registration. The very first occasion is the proviso attached to section 9(1), where it says that provided that a trademark shall not be refused registration if before the date of application for registration it has acquired a distinctive character as a result of use made of it or is a well-known trademark. Well friends, first of all I would like to tell you what proviso does and what is the function of a proviso in the legislative interpretation. Section 9(1) having a proviso provides an exception to whatever has been said in the prior part of section 9(1) under clauses A, B and C of section 9(1). Proviso basically accepts few things from the purview of the main language of section, from the purview of whatever has been covered in the preceding clauses. It kind of provides some exceptions, and the exception provided under this proviso makes it aptly clear that any trademark which has acquired a distinctive character as a result of its use, or some trademarks or any trademark which is a well-known trademark, on that kind of a trademark the trademark board cannot apply any sort of prohibitions or grounds for refusal mentioned above under the clause A, B and C of the section 9(1). What does it mean friends? As per the proviso, if any trademark is already in existence and because of its use over the period of time it has acquired a distinctive character, then no matter that it is descriptive, notwithstanding that it is devoid of distinctive character initially, inherently, notwithstanding that it is customary in the current language, notwithstanding that it is a geographical name, it shall not be refused a registration. It has to be registered. I can give you a very apt example to make you understand. We all know about Bikaner wala, and the word Bikaner is a geographical place in the state of Rajasthan in India. As per section 9(1), especially section 9(1)(b), use of word Bikaner, which is a geographical name, shall not be registered as a trademark because it is descriptive of a geographical place. But the proviso attached to section 9(1) makes it easy for Bikaner wala to get the trademark registered on Bikaner, because it says that if any word is there which is well known, or if any mark is there which has acquired a distinctive character over the period of time, then no prohibition mentioned under section 9(1) in the preceding clauses of section 9 will not apply. So what do I mean to say? That Bikaner wala has acquired a distinctive character over the period of time on the goods which are sweets in this case. So everyone knows Bikaner wala with bhujia, with sweets, so that is allowed to be used no matter that it is a geographical place, and it comes under the prohibitions of section 9(1)(b. As per the proviso it is allowed. Well, we will continue the discussion for the next time friends. I rest here. Thank you so very much. Have a good day.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. Dear friends, for giving your feedback, you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in, and we would be meeting again very soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.